Back in 2001, Microsoft released its first ever gaming console with expectations that they were going to go head to head with Sony's almighty world-dominating PlayStation 2. Now, if we go directly in terms of sales, I will tell you right now, Xbox did not really get to compete with PlayStation all that much at all, only selling 24 million units by May of 2006, opposed to PlayStation 2's 160 million units. However, I will say if you compare the two consoles on every other standpoint other than sales, I can confidently tell you the Xbox was truly the console that I think paved the way for gaming today. Not only did the Xbox and PlayStation 2 launch at the same price of $300 US, but the Xbox also included the first ever internal hard drive for a gaming device. No more of those pesky memory cards unless you wanted to buy additional memory, but I never found that necessary. Another feature the Xbox introduced was the first ever dashboard feature for a console. A place where you could legitimately go and change your settings, connect to the internet. It was a place where you could install music and actually listen to the music in the background while you were playing games, which was actually very nostalgic now that I think about it. This beast also ran at 480i resolution, but could actually output 1080i if you had the proper components for it. Also on top of that, this console was what truly introduced the world of online gaming. Now I understand PlayStation may have had its share of online games, but it did not have a friends list, it did not have the ability to go into parties and talk to your friends outside of certain games, and the PlayStation also just didn't have arena shooters like Halo, which at the time took over the world by storm and introduced what I think is now considered the generic general formula for every PvP shooter game. In my opinion, the Xbox has always been extremely underrated, and today we are going to take a look at it nearly 25 years after its release. So just looking at the actual console before we dig into the gameplay, off of general observation, it is not crazy to say that this thing was an absolute fucking tank. At least double the size of the PS2, and the controller was also clunky as hell, but kind of nice for its time, although I will say I forgot the fact that it had triggers but not bumpers. The bumpers are actually replaced by those white and black buttons. But have no fear, because Retro Fighters has released a brand new wireless OG Xbox controller, also compatible with PC and Switch, that not only has the black and white buttons for classic players, but also features bumpers. Now that we've overlooked this titan of a console, let's get into playing some games. So the first game we're going to be taking a look at is none other than SSX Tricky 3. This is a snowboarding game that I actually wasn't able to come across as a kid, but due to the recommendations from my Twitch chat, I had to go out and get this because I've heard that the SSX Tricky series is an absolute classic. Now, while I have to admit I have not been able to play hours and hours of this game, I probably have been able to get a solid hour on it total, and I'd have to agree with my Twitch chat, this game is so much fun. From having free play to a career mode, to its own unique roster of characters with their own personalities, to the soundtrack of the game, all the way to the actual gameplay itself, which to me feels smooth as butter for a game that is supposedly, 20 years old. It's smooth, it's quirky, it's fast-paced, it's fun, it's not hard to get the hang of. A matter of fact, I didn't have to look up the controls at all. After about 5 seconds of playing the game, I understood how to do it. I also gotta admit, I love the color scheme in this game. Nice and vibrant, bright. It doesn't look like I'm just staring at a black and white drawing like most games feel like nowadays. Like, why is it that I can pick up a game made from what, I don't know, 2005, 2006? And I feel like I'm playing something that is better and more polished than shit that comes out today on the PlayStation 5. Well, to be honest, it's probably because back then they couldn't just update games, they had to actually release them complete, so that has something to do with it, but it feels like there was more effort put into games back then. It wasn't make or break for your studio. It wasn't years upon years after announcing a game that it came out. This is back when video games were fun and DLC didn't really exist, therefore all developers had to worry about was making their game fun. SSX Tricky 3 gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Now moving on to game number 2, we have none other than Crash Bandicoot in the Wrath of Cortex. Listen, to someone who is a lifelong Crash Bandicoot fan, and especially to someone who's now an adult with adult money, the first thing he had to do when buying an Xbox was, of course, get the game he never got to play as a kid, and that's Crash Bandicoot the Wrath of Cortex. Right off the bat, I would like to say that this game does a lot of really good things, and this game also does some pretty poor things, like the voice acting.
What are you looking at, fuzzhead? I'm Rocco, the Earth Elemental.
I mean, what the fuck is that? Some AI generated bullshit? We go from Aku Aku and Uka Uka to this? But outside of that, I will say this game does look like your typical Crash Bandicoot game, as well as introduce a couple of insanely fun new features that I've seen just in the first warp room. Now, unfortunately, with me saying it looks like your typical Crash Bandicoot game, that is not the same as me saying it plays like your typical Crash Bandicoot game. Now again, this might look like, you know, the same mechanics and same style that we're used to seeing on PS1 and PS2, but it does not feel like you are playing Crash Bandicoot. And what I mean by that is the actual gameplay itself. Something about this game, it feels slower, it feels sluggish. It feels like it wasn't supposed to be made for the Xbox, which to me is kind of throwing off the whole experience a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think I will be able to get through this game and enjoy every bit of it, because I have been able to with every other Crash Bandicoot except the newest one on PS5, because that one is ass. But majority of these games are all extremely similar. They're extremely fun, they're extremely beatable, and usually extremely memorable. So far, Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex on Xbox, I will give a 6.8 out of 10. Now moving on, we have one of my favorite original Xbox games of all time, and I know some people think this is a dud of the series, but it's none other than Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. Dude, I still love this game just as much as I did when I was a kid, and I can tell you firsthand from playing it for about 20 minutes, it still holds up just like it did in 2006. One of the things I really loved about this game was the roster with Tony Hawk, Bob Burnquist, Bam Margera, Rodney Mullen, Mike Vallely, my boy Ryan Sheckler, and many more. And one of the main reasons I always thought this game was so compelling back then as to why I do right now is just because of how easy this game is to pick up and play. Much like SSX, man, there is not a lot to know, and if you're experienced with Tony Hawk, all the controls are the same from the other games. Now, I can't lie, I can see why some people would be turned away by this game, as there is a lot of similarities between this and the previous games, level-wise, mechanic-wise, roster-wise. And what I mean by that is this game pretty much is just a watered-down version of Thug 2, but I never let that bother me as a kid, and I'm not ever gonna let that bother me now, dude. So many hours of this game were played in my friend Zach's basement while listening to Eminem in the background. And when we weren't playing against each other, we were playing the fun story mode that this game had. Again, kinda similar to Thug 2, but you had new objectives, you had new things to do, you had new people to unlock. Kinda sad, man. I feel like they just don't make Tony Hawk games like this at all anymore. I'm pretty sure the last one that they made that was new was Pro Skater 5, and that was a disaster. Then they remastered 1 and 2, which was good, and we haven't gotten anything since. Perhaps a remaster of American Wasteland or Underground 2 could be on the way. Either way, my grade for Tony Hawk's American Wasteland remains the exact same from what it did when I was a kid. It is a 9 out of 10. I love this game. I always will. Now, this next game may or may not be the literal reason that I have picked up an Xbox original in the first place. And this game is none other than Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. Now, granted, I used to play this game on GameCube back in the day. It was just cheaper to get it on Xbox, and I wanted an Xbox anyway, and it's the same exact game. Dude, if you haven't played this game, it fucking rules. And this is coming from a guy who doesn't like Smash Bros style games. I hate those kind of games. I think they're so boring, but this one is different. Well, maybe it's just because I like Godzilla, but it feels different. And I think part of the reason it may have felt different, you know, is not only the fact that you're gigantic monsters fighting, but the fact that you could explore the entire city and destroy every building. Not to mention the attacks were devastating as hell. BAM! You also had a special where you could use your own supercharge. Godzilla's is clearly his ice breath. Well, Godzilla 90s anyway. I think the 2000 ones is fire. You can see Megalon's ability here as he's able to go underground and he can pop up and fucking kick your ass just like that. And there was also a handful of power-ups that could help you out if you got them, like this right here where I get Mothra. Now, I can't sit here and feed you guys a complete line of crap by saying this is a flawless game and it feels absolutely amazing, because it doesn't. But as far as the actual game itself goes, compared to what I remember it being, this is again everything. It was a very unique spin to the fighting game genre. I thought the environments were awesome, how they were so interactive. Obviously the characters, me being a Godzilla fan, enjoyed every one of them. And if I gotta be honest, this is still down to earth, one of the most underrated fighting games I have ever played. It is a little repetitive after a while, like every fighting game, but Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee still sits at a solid 7.8 out of 10, which for a fighting game in me, that is really high. And the last game I'm going to be playing for this original Xbox review is what I consider to be the greatest basketball game of all time, NBA Street Volume 2. Look, man, if you're sitting there having a fucking epiphany right now going, holy shit, I think I remember that game. That used to be really fun. Well, let me tell you, it still is. This shit still hits harder than cocaine on a Friday night in Dallas if your name is Michael Irvin. Everything from the soundtrack, to the graphics, to the gameplay, to the character absolutely slaps in this game, still today. If you're asking me, this was the prime of basketball games. This is when they were actually playable. All you had to do was press a button to pass it, press a different button to shoot it. There was no fucking shot meter dictating absolutely everything. Still had a skill gap, but not one severe enough where I had to look up YouTube videos for 4 hours trying to find the correct jump shot. Another thing about this game is just how insane it was. I mean, you could do unfathomable shit in this game. Big time plays, big time dunks, big time blocks, big time fun. I truly do not believe we will ever have an NBA game this fun and this replayable ever again. NBA Street 2 gets a 9.5 out of 10 for me. So now for my review on the actual console. After spending about a week playing it and playing various games while doing that, I have come to the conclusion that the Xbox Original in 2025 is still a solid ass console. For something so old to be able to do everything that this thing still does, it's pretty incredible. Also, for the price tag of about $100 that you can pick one of these bad boys up at your local game shop, that's not bad. The only thing I do recommend to anybody who is going to pick one of these up is make sure the disk drive works before you buy it. That is an ongoing issue with these things. Now, it can be fixed, but why would you want to bother with that in the first place? If I had to rate the Xbox Original out of 100 right now, I would give it an 82, and that to me is a B.